We're sitting in a garden at the end of the growing season in Texas, and last time we were in the garden it looked nice and green in the spring. It's very different now. You wouldn't recognize it from 6-8 months ago. And things are dying down, they're about ready to be pulled, but you can see a few plants that have been put in that will grow over the winter. That's a seasonal cycle. They're quite different across the country, so wherever you are, you got to learn to understand how the seasons change. And by the way, with environmental change, the seasons everywhere are not exactly what they used to be. Maybe we could learn something from a concept in ecology or biology called punctuated equilibrium. Now, Darwin's original theory of evolution was there was a gradual change that took place over a very long period of time. And about 40 years ago, the examiners of fossil record decided maybe that's not really true. At various times, Earth had gone through a huge transformation, like a huge comet hitting Earth, and it totally changed the climate, and then everything had to go back to reset and readjust all as a whole all over again. A few species survived, others emerged, and life resumed its gradual transformative pace. That's somewhat like the condition we have with the world economy today. Our assumption is it's expanding, it'll continue to do that at a pretty steady pace, but maybe we're coming up on a punctuation. More things changing than can be assumed by economic models. Now, economic models have been very much criticized. A notable critic among others is Michael Hudson. He notes that asset values and bubbles and busts are not really incorporated in standard market supply and demand models. And so they were very poorly prepared to forecast the 2008 recession. Furthermore, he contends that this is a very important part of the economy. It should be emphasized because the direction of things is for a few people to acquire more and more assets of individuals, of companies, and even of entire countries. And if that trend continues, at some point there will have to be an explosive reset. And so, as you might gather, he's excited a political firestorm. And still, he does not include very much about the possibilities of a huge environmental punctuation or disruption. Now, when economists want to think a little more broadly, they have occasionally used social cycles or secular cycles. And the use of those for forecasting goes way back to antiquity. Ancient rulers would consult oracles, or they might consult some seer who proclaimed to understand astrology, getting signs from the heavens, on the belief that what had gone around might come back around in some form. And you'd get some comprehensible sign from a very complex universe on what do I do here. I don't know that we can do that, but Peter Turchin is a guy that examined the secular cycles pretty well, and his contention is that we are headed for another major disruption. He does this quantitatively, comes up with indexes, and according to his, I think it's his economic equality index and his social and political stress index, that the United States today is in about the same state of social stress as it was in the 1850s during the run-up to the Civil War. His prognostication, the next 10 years or so are apt to be pretty stressful. It's going to be a period of very turbulent change, and still Turchin includes very little about environmental disruption. Throw that in from the people like me that project. You cannot keep growing in a finite world forever, and if all that comes together at once, you're talking major upheaval. Nothing, including the systems we think should go on forever economically, might last. Got to think totally differently. So everybody that's done this says, well, if you kind of know something like this is going to come, and even if you can't say quite when, is there anything we can do about it? Don't know for sure, but there are things we can try. It's kind of a three-step thing. The first stage is, can you just be a little more reflective, do a little more self-doubting, admit that maybe you don't know everything and things that are going to change are not always within your control. Aha. If you're in business, you want to control things. Maybe you can. A second one is, can we have a chance of agreeing on how to define a fact and what good logic is for interpreting the things, the facts that we can see today and go forward with them? That's not as easy as it sounds. Even people working on relatively tame problems want to scapegoat, blame other people, do anything except get down to what the root cause of a process or other kind of problem really is. And it constantly interferes with that in industry or government or elsewhere. If you can do both of those things to some extent, maybe we can enter dialogue, meaning everybody has to listen. That is an individual discipline. Can you listen? You may think the other person's beliefs are nutty, but listen anyway. They may not be factual, but that they believe them and might act on them is a fact and has to be considered. It's part of the overall situation. So how do you map out what the situation really is? And if everybody involved begins to get a grasp of that overall situation in that context, maybe you can begin to work it out. If that could happen on a larger scale, that would be kind of a civilizational transformation. We've not been there before. You can see it today in the politics from local to global. And so, besides the Compression Institute, there are a good many other organizations that have ideas like that in mind. We'll have a list of them, and we invite you to submit your input on how can we do this.
Don't be afraid. Do you have a question?